I'm really happy that we opened earlier on with an act of worship when we passed the peace, because I actually need to open with a confession, which is also an act of worship. And this morning, I picked up the preparation that I'd done on what I was going to say today, and I started reading it through, and I said, I can't say any of this authentically. If I get up here, it's all going to be fake. And then when I tried to write something new, I was either becoming angry or I was just becoming depressed when I was writing it. I thought this isn't going to work either. So I was raised as a Pentecostal. I'm relying on the Holy Spirit very much right now because I have no idea what is going to come out of my mouth next. That is also wise. We don't operate on the 3-question system. That was quite new to me, that one. And I just actually want to share a bit of the story behind that. Since the postal vote was announced, I guess I've been in a place, being an evangelical person who supports marriage equality, I sit on a lot of fences. I'm in the middle of a lot of things. I think in a lot of the vitriol in this debate, I've had the bigot label and the queer label. You know, I can get both of those. And one thing that I guess in my ego I pride myself in is being a peacemaker and a person who's able to reconcile different points of view and who's very passionate about the unity of the church and the division that this yes and no camp is causing. And so I wanted to come here with a message of peacemaking. And a lot of people in my church actually had, in my church and actually over the last month, a number of people in my church have been doing street ministry in Oxford Street, just talking to people and saying, look, we're the church and we understand people are stressed and we just want to listen to your stories right now. And doing all of that, to me, that's the peacemaking work that Jesus talks about in the Beatitudes. And that was so important. And then 2 days ago, I just kind of cracked. Like I wasn't able to hold that space of being a peacemaker anymore. And that 2 days ago it happened to coincide with that announcement of the $1 million. I don't know why that is what triggered it, but I spent the whole morning unable to work because all my brain wanted to do was come up with really clever and cutting Facebook statuses. And I kept on trying to write them and then going away. And I'm so glad that I have this practice that I write stuff and I go away and I come back and I read it. I'm like, oh, that's really horrible. Why would I... This is not me who's saying this in this moment. So actually, I reached out to some people, and I reached out to Keith, and I said, Keith, I need to tell you that I'm not going to be posting anything on Facebook, because if I tell you that, then I won't do it because I'll know you'll see. And then I thought that would be over by this morning, but I woke up this morning and I was kind of still in that place. And this morning, somebody who is, I'm their pastor, but they provided me some pastoral care and said, why don't you speak honestly about what's going on with you? And I said, that's a really good idea. And I also brought it before God, and I said, God, I need to know what this anger really is. And I was just sitting in God's presence. And what I felt was that this is grief that I'm experiencing. Like, it's coming out as anger. And what I'm feeling is grief, and it's not grief about $1 million. I mean, I could imagine what $1 million could do in my church budget, but that's not what I'm upset about. And it's not, some of the conversations that I was trying not to have, I was getting very angry at people, even people who were in the middle, who were saying, I don't agree with the $1 million, but I support. And I'd get really angry at those people. And what I was actually angry about was my feeling that the church doesn't seem to care about the impact that its actions will have on the way that people perceive who the church is. Because there was a statistic that I read this morning that said 63% of Australians believe that religion does more harm than good in this country. And that breaks my heart to hear that. Because I don't believe that. I believe that a relationship with God can be an incredibly powerful, healing thing in people's lives, and it's something that I've carried throughout my whole life, and I know the strength that it's given me. I know the purpose that it's given me. And when I think about a message that's going out and makes people feel like the church is not for them, and I know that people's actions are lovingly intended. I can't imagine that the executive body that made this decision were there like cackling like supervillains from some Disney thing, that in my head, how are we going to use this $1 million? I know that these people were intending this in a loving way, and they're probably concerned about the breakdown of families and all these different things, but it's not experienced in a loving way by the people who see it. And as church leaders, we have to have a kind of an emotional intelligence that says, if I behave in this way, my loving intention is all well and good, but people are going to experience hostility. And that's going to result in division, and it's going to result in division between one Christian and another, and it's going to result in a division between Australian people looking at the church and saying, those people, they just want to hurt me and they don't care. So one of the things that I really love about this event that we're having here today is the purpose of it has nothing to do with winning people over to a yes vote. And one thing I've believed from the beginning of this thing is, you know what, it's a bit too late to try and win Australia over. Like, this is a journey that takes people decades to move from one side to another. And actually, Francis Foon is right here in the audience, has done an incredible job of making space for people who are in the middle and they're nervous, making space for people to feel comfortable about, yes, we can have some impact on that, but we're not going to bring the extreme over to the centre, and there's not going to be a huge movement. But there's going to be a legacy that comes out of this moment, and that's going to be the impact that our actions have on relationships and the way that people perceive the church. And I've been lucky to be part of a beautiful group of people who've been out there on Oxford Street, and we were a bit terrified when we first went out about whether we were going to hear a lot of anger from people and frustration. And we just stood there. We had a rainbow cross and a sign that said that we were chaplains, and our only agenda was to ask if people were okay. And we've spent probably about 5 evenings out there now, and some other events we've been to. And without fail, every time, a number of people will just come up to us. Steph's actually been there with us as well. People will come up to us and say, we've seen what you're doing and we want to let you know that it matters. And what that has made me realise is that we're at a moment, one of these rare moments in history where our actions can have a disproportionately large impact on what happens. Like, really small things that we do are just going to be remembered for a long period of time. And that means that if people do things that are not the brightest or most intelligent thing to do, that might have huge negative impacts, and we can't control that because those are things that other people do. But this is also a time when really small acts of kindness and really small acts that make the love of God visible in our world are actually able to have a disproportional impact, and people can remember for a long time that, do you know what? There was a time when I felt the whole church was conspiring and wanted to take our rights away. That's not how everyone defines it, but that's what people are thinking. But there was that one Christian who was not that at that time. And I think that will have a lasting impact, maybe not on a percentage of Australia, but maybe on some people that you know. And I think that's a really beautiful moment. I hope that that's what this can be tonight.